This is BBC Radio 4. Now it's time for Woman's Hour with Jenni Murray.
Good morning. Now, just as feminism becomes a more respectable term adopted by large numbers of young women who don't refer to it as the F word or say, I'm not a feminist, but, comes another debate about terminology. Are you a feminist or an equalist? Does feminism work only in the interests of women? And if so, should we all be equalists, working for equal opportunities for both? Well, Dr. Laura Waters is a fellow in pharmaceutical chemistry at Huddersfield University and calls herself an equalist. Charlotte Proudman is a barrister and a feminist. Charlotte, why a feminist, not an equalist?
Good morning, Jenny. Well, I define myself as a feminist that supports the liberation of women. You see, in my view, we need feminism to address the fact that women are systematically disadvantaged because we are women, because of our gender. And equalists ignore the gendered nature of the oppression of women. So, for example, some equalists will argue that the reason only 23% of politicians are women is because of individual failures, because women simply haven't worked hard enough. But feminists, such as myself, we look at the reasons so few women are in politics and law and other spheres that are dominated by men because of the structural inequalities that women face in every walk of life.
Laura, why are you not a feminist?
Good morning, Jenny. I'd say that I prefer to describe myself as an equalist. I believe in equal opportunity based on merit, regardless of gender. So I believe it's about getting the best person for a job. All that should matter is that they're able to do their job, that they're qualified, that they're experienced, and they're the best person. And everything else should be irrelevant. And I completely understand that in some cases this isn't true. But in my experience, in my job, then I think we've made great progress. And I do think that there is a lot of equal opportunity out there for us in science.
But to what degree, then, are you ignoring the oppression of women?
I don't think I'm ignoring the oppression of women, and I do understand some of Charlotte's points in that in some respects there are struggles, and it's not easy to be a female scientist, but I think my experience at the University of Huddersfield is a really positive one, and we have a lot of opportunities, and we're doing a lot of work to encourage women to apply for jobs and to progress. So in my experience, it's very positive. I do appreciate that some people don't have that experience, but perhaps what we could do is take some lessons from where it has worked well in my area and apply those to others.
So Charlotte, it's simply a case of the best person for the job.
Well, in my view, it's most certainly not the case, unfortunately. I mean, because when you're aspiring to equality and when you consider yourself to be an equalist, what you're saying is that women have to aspire to live up to a man's standard. The man's standard is considered to be the status quo, and what that means is often we'll find women who have to take on very male attributes. They have to aspire to men's behaviour, so that may mean ritual humiliation, banter, sexism, engaging in gentlemen's clubs, rites of passage, and so on. And so women have to become one of the boys. Margaret Thatcher's a really good example of this, because when we think about her, what we saw is many politicians considered her to be the most masculine man in Parliament. And she even had to lower her voice in order to be a man. You know, ultimately that's what she became. She was therefore valued on men's terms rather than her own. And women's only survival within these male-dominated areas is by being an honorary man.
So, Laura, to what, I mean, she was always described as the best man in the cabinet. To what extent do you, within your equalism, have to be the best man in the laboratory?
I think in some respects you do have to stand up for yourself, but I think some men find that just as hard as women. As more women are joining, I'm finding that the working practice has changed. We've introduced things like flexible working hours, transparency in promotions, those sorts of things. At the University of Huddersfield, we have in physics a really equal ratio, male to female ratio at all levels, right up to professor, and the same's true in pharmacy. We have women at all levels. In some subjects that's not the case, and there is more work to be done, but my line manager's a woman, and our new dean of applied sciences, that's a woman as well. So we have positive role models, and I don't feel like we have to change our ways to be more male. I think we're absolutely fine just being the way we are.
What do you do if the banter or the sexism kicks in?
I think everybody has different ways of dealing with it, and I think it's a personal thing. But I know of men who would say that they find it just as much of a struggle as a woman. Like I said before, I can imagine in some careers then maybe it's not equal at the moment, and we need to work on that. But in my area at the University of Huddersfield, I think we're doing really, really well.
So Charlotte, equalism is aspiring to a fairer deal for everybody, and things are beginning to change. Has feminism, this is a difficult question for me to ask, but had its day?
Absolutely not. I mean, just the examples that Laura's just given when she says that sexism is an individual thing, you know, it's in terms of how individuals address banter and so on. This is not about individuals. This is affecting women as a whole. This is a gendered issue. This is often perpetrated by men. We don't see women being often sexist towards other women. This is very much a gender dynamic which permeates every sector and every sphere of life in which women are working. And they are discriminated often against because they're women. So, for example, women solicitors in the UK, I'm a barrister, and I've often seen that women solicitors have been sexually discriminated against, and we know that a third of women solicitors have experienced sex discrimination. And yet how many of these will bring cases in terms of under the Equality Act for sex discrimination? Very few, because they know once they do, they'll be branded a troublemaker and all hopes for promotion will be dashed.
So Laura, hang on, let me just put this to Laura. You're preserving the patriarchy, Laura.
I don't think so at all. I think that we're working very hard to change things, and what we're concentrating on is the applications at the very beginning of the process. So how do we encourage more women to apply for the jobs, because then there will be more women on the shortlist, which increases the probability that a woman will be successful in the end at getting the job, and then those women can work their way up to senior management. Now, we still have work to do, but we're pretty confident that we're getting there, and we're not in a status quo in any kind of a way. We are changing, we are adapting, and we're looking to the future. We're looking at ways forward and positive ways that we can change things.
Charlotte, if you could just round up, as a feminist, what do you do to create the atmosphere that suits all women, that's different from what Laura's doing?
Well, what I believe in ultimately is liberation as opposed to equality, and so I don't support equal focus on men and women. I want to embrace women's differences because often they are different. So for an example, as in a right to an abortion, that is not an equal right. Women are requesting discrimination because of their gender differences. And what Laura said earlier is that what she wanted to encourage is more women to apply for other jobs, such as in STEM. Now, that in itself is not an equal application for men and women. That's focusing specifically on women. And so there we see that's not an example of equality, it's positive discrimination. That's what I fundamentally would support.
Well, Charlotte Proudman and Dr. Laura Waters, we could sit here and discuss this all day. Thank you both very much indeed for being with us.